Westwood match, huh?
This was, I think, in '87, when Isabel passed away.
Oh.
That's the last time we were in Franklin.
No, I'm sorry, this was taken at my grandmother's.
Oh, no. This isn't happening.
Everyone has eaten except Jimmy, and he's working on it.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Will. The little gal's gonna come by and she will pick up dishes as we get to.
Very good.
And in the meantime, please give your attention up in this direction.
Oh.
That means you too, Jackson. Before I start too far, let me show you one of my latest acquisitions. This is a key to the city of Caro, Michigan,
Wow.
to which I was awarded day before yesterday from the mayor of the city of Caro.
Wow.
Only because I happen to be running the class of 48, 49 reunion group. But anyway, he was our speaker, did a good job. Our little town here's got a lot of things going. Unfortunately, the population back when we left was about 4,000. I think he said it's 4,300 now. That's 50, 60 years later. But anyway, it's very nice. I'll add that, I've got one from the city of Bowling Green, Kentucky that I got back in 1974, 75, somewhere back in there, when we chartered a new chapter for the National Association of Accountants in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And anyway, some of the trivia that you'll pick up over the years. At previous reunions, you've heard reference to Samuel Langdon. Anybody ever hear of Samuel Langdon? Yeah, Jim has. Anyway, Langdon, he was president of Harvard University from 1774 to 1780. During the Revolutionary War, not a good time. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts in January 1723, and he attended the Boston Latin School, undergraduate, and then ultimately graduated from Harvard later. And he taught in New Hampshire for several years, studied theology, and was licensed to preach. Back in those days, if you were a preacher, you were better off than a lawyer, I think. Anyway, I've got some stuff here I gotta flip back and forth, so be patient with me here. He was appointed in 1745. He was appointed chaplain of a regiment. Again, during the Revolutionary War period, he was appointed chaplain of a regiment, and this is a regiment of the Continental Army, if you will, as opposed to the British Army, and was present at the capture of Fortress Louisburg. I don't know where the devil Fortress Louisburg was, but I guess it was an important battle. On his return, he was appointed assistant to Reverend James Fitch of the North Church of Portsmouth, I guess New Hampshire. He was ordained as a pastor in 1747, continued in that charge until 1774, when he became the president of Harvard at age 51. At Harvard, his ardent patriotism led him to adopt measures that were obnoxious to the Tory students. And although he endeavored to administer the government of the college with justice, his resignation was virtually compelled in 1780. The following year, he became pastor of the Congregational Church at Hampton Falls, New Hampshire, after, I will say he was kicked out of Harvard, but he became, somewhere else I read that because back then Harvard was a church-related school, sponsored school, and all the presidents of it were pastors, preachers. And this guy, Samuel Langdon, apparently liked to preach, because it mentions here somewhere, I think, that he'd get the faculty and the student body together in a room someplace, and he'd preach to them for like an hour or two or three, and they just got, I guess they got tired of it and griped to the right folks and talked him into leaving anyway. Anyway, in 1788, remember 1776 is the Revolutionary War, and we'll talk more about that in just a second, but in 1788, he was a delegate to the New Jersey Convention that adopted the Constitution of the United States, often led its debates, and did much to remove prejudice against the Constitution. We're talking about the U.S. Constitution that we now abide by. This guy was involved in the debates leading up to the adoption of the Constitution. This is one of your relatives.
And his connection to us in,
His connection to us is that I don't know exactly, I haven't traced it back, but
Grandma Woodworth was a Langdon.
Grandma Woodworth was a Langdon, okay. And he was a Langdon, so that answers the question, I guess. Incidentally, if you have a question as we go through here, give me a whistle, or I'll slow down a little bit.
So wait, Woodworth, was she husband to Mark Emerick Joslin?
No,
Or, I'm sorry.
No, I was grandmother's father. Grandpa Woodworth.
say that again so Derek can hear you.
That was grandmother's father.
Was
Grandmother's father.
Yeah.
This is Blanche's father?
Yeah,
Blanche
Mark, oh,
Blanche
this is before.
Woodworth.
Yeah.
Okay.
and her mother was a Langdon.
While we're right at this stage talking at that, would you make the comment that you wanted to make?
Oh,
relative
yeah,
to that thing
so-
there? Derek he's
I've-
while we've been eating and drinking
Yeah.
and so forth, he's been over here.
Yeah, I
Building up-
created a list of, or well, really, a chart of everyone in this room should be on it, and a few more that aren't in this room, of their familial relation stemming back to Mark Emerick Joslin and Margaret Scott. So if you want to check that out, be on this table after Uncle Bob speaks.
Thank you, Derek. Good work.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure how that'll make you a lot of money 20 years from now, but that's good stuff.
Don't worry, I got engineering.
Good.
That'll make me a lot of
Good
money.
practice.
He's perking to, looking to get an EE down the road somewhere. This guy Langdon, there's a lot of stuff here that I'm going to sort of, during the period that Langdon was president of the college down there, the college was going through I'm just going to paraphrase a lot of this stuff. They were going through a tough time because they had to shut down, I think they actually physically shut down the whole thing as far as education was concerned for a better part of a year. Number one, everybody that was a college student potential was out with a rifle someplace trying to win the Revolutionary War. And as a consequence, the college, and another thing that slowed things down, General Washington at one time took over one of the major buildings of the college there at Cambridge and Harvard University. He took it over as his headquarters for some period of time. And then there were other major buildings that were part of the campus that were taken over at different times by different military units during the Revolutionary War. So during that period of time, Harvard was going through a pretty tough patch. And obviously they ultimately survived. They're certainly doing well today, I think. But Langdon apparently did a good job of steering them through that period. And it was only because of his enthusiasm, if you will, his enthusiasm about imparting the Lord's word or whatever to people and preaching to them, that caused the students probably who talk to their parents who were paying the bill to talk him into handing in his shingle or whatever it was he was sporting at that point. But anyway, he resigned and went back to being a preacher back in Massachusetts where he came from. Anyway, let's go back and see if I can figure out where I was. Do we have any questions about Langdon at this point? And I'll ask you about questions a little bit later too, but anyway, this guy Langdon was they say and I say, the takeaway from all this Who Shot John that I've been talking about here is that your relative, Samuel Langdon, was a very accomplished clergyman and educator. And there, if you can Google him, and you get yards and yards. Go to Harvard University presidents. They got a whole string of them. And you can get on Langdon, and there's information ad infinitum about his comings and goings. So if you need to find out more about Samuel Langdon, get on the internet. Joslins are scattered about the world now, as they have been for years. They're much fewer in number than, say, the Smiths and the Joneses, which are probably in the majority. In 2014, there were about 12,450 Joslins in the United States. 12,000 plus. That's correct, not correct. 12,450 in the world, correction, world. By far the most of them were in the United States with about 8,600 Joslins. Yes, ma'am. Question?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say something, you just reminded me of something.
Okay.
My 26th great granddaughter's name is Joslin, and that was because of our last name.
Very good.
She's almost a year old.
Very good.
She was, my granddaughter was very close to John and myself, and she named her little girl Joslin.
Beautiful. Good show. That's good.
I meant to share it earlier and I forgot
That's
about it.
good.
I didn't
Well,
mean to interrupt.
we're delighted that we're that prestigious, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
Popular. That's good.
Held in high regard, huh?
That's right. She
Yeah.
will be held in high regard. Tell her to come to our Joslin gathering when she gets a little bigger. We'd love to have a Joslin here, you know, that'd be good. That'd be good. Anyway, Joslin's in the United States, 8,600, this is in 2014, a few years back. 8,600, or 69% of the Joslins in the world were in the United States. In England, they only had 1,800. God, you'd have thought England, where we ultimately came from, would have had a pot full of them, but only 1,800, 14%. Canada had 450, 4%. Australia, Brazil, South Africa all had slightly less than 300, less than 1%. Then there's a whole string of countries around the world that have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that, scattered all over the place, but very few in number. There are a bunch Joslin spelling variants. We go Joslin. Similar pronunciations, variants are pronunciations that are roughly the same but with different spellings. And the variant with the most folks was Jocelyn, Jocelyn. There was, in 2014, there were 11,265 of those babies around. So there were a lot of them. The Joslyn at 3,800, Josselin 2,100, Josling Jostling 1,100, Jocelyn Josselyn 950, and Joselyn 700. And they had dozens of other countries and a lot of different variations that people dreamed up. And they have definitions. If you get in digging into this stuff, they got definitions for a lot of different things. A definition of Joslin or Josling is a corruption, doesn't sound very good, corruption of Jocelyn, Joscelin, or Josselyn, the name of an ancient knightly Essex family of Hyde Hall that held the manor of High Roding and other extensive estates in this and surrounding counties. As back in the 16th century, the name is established adjoining Suffolk County this is in England. Essex is an area in England, as is Suffolk. But anyway, the name, the Joslin that we enjoy is, I won't say it's a bastardization, but they call it a corruption of some other names. And there are pages of different iterations, if you will, of Joslin. And we have a motto. Let me see if I can figure out where I got motto here. Motto, where? Motto, here we are, the motto. Joslin motto. The motto was originally a war cry, slogan. Mottos were first began to be shown with the arms. You've seen in your book there's a coat of arms of Joslin. And only that's only one of several that could be picked, and Margaret picked that one, which is a good one. Mottos first began to be shown with arms in the 14th and 15th centuries, but were not in general use until the 17th century. Thus, the oldest coats of arms generally do not include a motto. Mottos seldom form a part of the grant of arms. Under most heraldic authorities, a motto is an optional component of the cost of coat of arms and can be added to or changed at will. Many families have chosen not to display a motto. In our case, our motto is "Faire mon devoir." It is my duty, to do my duty, to do my duty. Faire mon devoir, Fairemondevor, which is on the bottom of that.
Do my work, to do my work.
Do my work, well, it says here to do my duty, but that's
Okay.
basically the same thing. Anyway, after going through all that, I'm sure a lot of people remembered those statistics, but there probably are. Let me answer another, while we're talking about that. We had, back some time ago, our son split some money and gave me first and then Anita second the little kit where you get your DNA
Spit kit?
result.
Yeah.
It's a spit kit, that's exactly what it is. I hadn't heard it
I
referred
just
to
coined
that
it.
way, but okay, that's good. Great genius.
It's all
Great
being
genius.
coined.
Anyway, the result of that, Margaret's and mine should be about the same, and she had already gotten hers, Sister Margaret. And mine, I'm trying to think, mine was, I don't have it with me, but most of it was Ireland, Scotland. I think there was about 42% of it was somewhere in the British Isles. Then there was Western Europe, had maybe 17% or something like that. Western Europe, which is Spain, Portugal, probably France. And then
Yeah, could be.
the thing that confused me, there was 2% that was Oriental. I don't know where that came from. Where
I
that came
wouldn't
from.
say-
But Margaret showed about 1.5% of Oriental, and the rest of it was. Margaret commented. I sent the result of Anita's. Anita's had. I happen to have hers right here. Hers is Great Britain, 67%. And Ireland, Scotland, Wales, 24%. Iberian Peninsula, which again is Spain and Portugal.
Yeah.
3%. Scandinavia, 2%. East Europe, less than 1%. Europe West, less than 1%. South European Jewish, 2%.
Oi.
Oi! Anyway, I said this to Margaret, and Margaret come back and she says, "God, she's more British than we are." Anyway, her grandparents, well, at least her grandfather's side of the family, came over from England, and they settled in Virginia, and he had a brother, and when they were young kids in their early 20s, I guess, they came across the Appalachians and into Tennessee. And they stopped at Portland, Tennessee, and they had a property there. I don't know whether they got a land grant or what, but they were there, and shortly time after that, they found a grant available up in Christian County, Kentucky, not too far from where she came from. And so they settled up there, and that's where her grandfather was at age 96 or something. When I first met him, after having just married her, I guess, shortly there before. And his parting words to me were, a little guy, he was not very big, probably weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, and he was 90-something at the time. Take good care of our girl. I said, "Yes, sir, I will." So I tried mightily over the years to do that.
You did a good job.
Well, thank you.
You're talking about Western Europe, the first Woodworth I think Ella called him Dubayagarde. But some will argue it should have been Garde du Bois, but he came over from France with William the Conqueror.
He did.
Before they conquered England, so that could be where some of the Western Europe
Mhm.
enters
Could be.
in.
I've seen things that relate our name, I guess the name primarily, with something to do with France.
Yeah.
A name that came
During
over
that
from
time, I
France.
read on the internet. Yeah.
Also, there's a
Yeah.
castle in France called Joslin
Is there?
Castle.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, you plan to go visit one of those castles with your name on it. So
It
that's-
sounds like a
Sure,
good place.
Yeah.
We were over there, but I don't know if we went to that one.
Anyway, now we're down to the point where I say, now that you've heard all this, this thing, anybody have a question? A question, and I don't limit it to what I've been saying here. Does anyone have a question about Joslin's, about my family, your family, the Harbell family, the Collier family?
Well, I was always curious about why Mark Emerick came from the west side of the state over to Caro. What was the draw?
Pete
Well,
Peterson, wasn't it?
Over, you didn't know Pete Peterson. Over, if you go out M81 past here, but going east, and Deckerville Road cuts off to the right, out there, a couple, 3 miles. And right in that corner, there was a guy that bought a bunch of property way back in the probably 30s or 20s, I guess. His name was Peter Peterson. And he talked, his voice was way down like it's something of this sort of thing. And anyway, when Pete talks, he just kind of like, just like gravel in his throat. Jim can mimic him a whole lot better than I can, but anyway, Pete Peterson, somehow, I don't know how he met Mark Emerick, but he talked Mark Emerick into moving to Caro.
From
This
Grand
guy-
Rapids area.
From the
Greenville area.
Greenville area, over near north of Grand Rapids. And Pete Peterson, if you go to his father's house, which was right up above ours down there on Romaine Road, and you go down through the gully, which was right in back of their house, and up the other side and up on the level land, that whole area in there was loaded with brickbats, little screwy, partially made bricks. Pete Peterson had a brick making facility over there for a number of years. And that whole area over there is full of old bricks, or was back in the day. And in answer to your question, it was Pete Peterson who talked Grandpa into moving to Caro. And I don't know the connection between the two, or how they met, I don't know anything about that, but Jim remembers, well,
Yeah.
there's something in writing, and I don't know, maybe you put in the local paper or something.
Yeah,
there was
yeah, guy screwed it up, he said Greenville, Alabama.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was,
know
that
where
was
the
kind
hell
of,
he
that was
ever
kind
got
of,
that.
kind of dumb. But,
Yeah, but,
anyway,
Yeah.
we keep mentioning to people, and probably you all know that, we know where the Strand Theater is in Caro,
yeah.
right? Rick, you know where the Strand Theater is, don't you?
Yes, sir.
You know that?
On Saturday morning.
Okay, well, that front there, that front of where the marquee is, and along the side down Frank Street, back in from like 1915, 18, 20, up in the 20s.
Yeah, about 08 to 20, is it?
08 to 20, 1908 to 20, Mark Emerick Joslin had a dry goods store, Joslin Dry Goods Store. We got pictures of
I've
it.
seen pictures of it.
Okay. And a lot of people haven't seen it. It was amazing. Some of my class of 48 classmates, you know, the Strand Theater's been there ever since I can remember. I don't remember when it wasn't there, so it's been there for a long time. So that's what they remember. They didn't know anything about.
That preceded our entry into the world by
Yeah.
considerable
Yeah.
margin.
Yeah, I was telling Ariel a little earlier about getting on the internet and playing around with numbers. I remembered somebody saying, and I don't remember who it was, saying that I was born on Phillip Street in Roseville, which is kind of a suburb of Detroit.
Oh.
And I got to digging around on there, and I came upon a 1931 census report,
Mhm.
copy, hand-printed form that had census information on it, and it had this Phillip Street on it.
Yeah.
And it had Robert S. Joslin Sr., age, I don't know, he was 31 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had John H. Joslin, age, same age.
Hubert.
Yeah.
And then it had Dorothy I think it was, Joslin, and she was 10 years younger or something, several years younger. And then it had Robert S. Joslin Jr., infant. It didn't say how old I was, but it was interesting to see that
Yeah,
on a piece of
yeah.
paper that it was on that street. And I looked up on Google Earth, zeroed in on that street number. I had the number of it, and it shows it's a little house. I don't know,
Still there.
Very impressive. It's just kind of a square house. It looks like it's a couple thousand.
Dick was born in Rose Mill too.
I have no idea. I don't remember
Yeah.
that. I don't know that.
But I don't know where, somewhere around the 11 Mile and Gratiot area, so.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
You were born what year?
1930.
30, okay, so that was, maybe the auto industry was still going pretty strong then?
Well, maybe in 1930 it was, but shortly thereafter, Dad, I don't know where his dad worked, but my dad worked for a company called the Bud Company.
Yeah.
Bud Company.
Connors
And they-
Road.
Pardon?
Connors Road.
You know about that?
Yes, sir.
Well, they were in the automobile business somehow. I'm not sure what.
Bud
Mhm.
Wheel.
Wheels.
Bud Wheel.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jim, yep.
Okay, anyway, he worked for that company, and then apparently during the beginning of the 30s, the automobile industry went to heck in a handbasket, and he got laid off. And there weren't any, apparently, so he moved up. And if any of you have ever been back down Romaine Road all the way to the end, where the Bechtels lived, if you go where their house is now and go about another 200 feet, right beside the river, Cass River's over here, and you go past where their house is, and where the terrain starts to go slant downhill a little bit, right in there, Dad built a tar paper shack. I don't remember, it was probably, I forgot, I don't know how big it was. He has a little thing on his father with a tar paper shack in it.
Yeah, I found
That was.
it wasn't the actual shack, unfortunately, but in my mind, it looked like what it
Yeah,
might have.
I remember it looking, the surface of it looked like that. The shape of it was a little different. The front of it was the front of the one you had was a little narrower. Ours was longer toward the front and probably not as far back, more rectangular in shape than square. But that's.
Low cost.
Low cost.
Low cost housing.
And I can remember things about that. I think I was probably maybe 3 years old, 2.5, something like that. I don't know. I just remember. I remember the facility. I can remember inside of it. One half was like a kitchen, and we had a settee. They didn't have a settee, but there was a kitchen type area there where we ate. Had a table to eat around. And then the back part, there was separated with like curtains or something, like sheets, I don't know what they were, some kind of separation to keep the bedroom areas separate from the other areas. And outside, I can remember right outside of the front door of the house, there was a rock. Of course, in my mind, it was a huge rock, but it was probably about yay tall, big rock. And I can remember my dad and mother out near that rock. And it seems to me it was late in the afternoon, as my mind remembers it, but Dad had built a kind of a sawhorse type of thing out of a couple of crossed timbers, and had a log across this thing, and the log, as I remember, was like 8 or 10 inches in diameter. And my dad had a crosscut saw, 2-man crosscut saw. My mother was on one end.
Wow.
My dad was on the other end, and they were cutting this log up into chunks that my dad, I'm sure, cut them up with an axe, probably chopped them up into smaller things that could be put in a pot-bellied stove, which was what heated that char paper shack. But, that, and I can remember, a lot of things don't come back, but one thing I remember we had, I'm sure we ate rather meagerly, although I don't remember much of it. I remember one day, my mother used to make ginger ale, not ginger ale, what's the other one?
Root beer?
Root beer.
Yeah,
She used to make
yeah,
root beer.
She mentioned
And,
that.
they had a, I don't know where they got the bottles, but they had bottles that were sort of like a Pepsi-Cola bottle, 12-inch Pepsi-Cola bottle. And they had a bottle capper, put the liquid in there. It had sugar and flavoring and all that sort of thing in it. And put this cap on there, and apparently over time, it developed some pressure, you know, like
Like
wine.
fermentation, maybe.
Ferment and everything. And I can remember her getting a couple of those bottles of that stuff out and putting them on the table. And it was a bowl of potato salad, I remember very clearly, in the middle of the table. And she was setting the table. And one of these bottles blew up, the top just blew up, pow! And all over the ceiling. And, I remember the potato salad was literally covered with it, you know, it's soupy with it. And that, I don't know why I would remember something like that, but I did.
Dramatic.
That was way back.
Sarsaparilla all over, huh?
That's the tar paper shack area.
It would have been a big thing to go from nice living in a kind of a Silicon Valley town. You know, Detroit was probably like Silicon Valley is now, and then
Well, I can remember, I think I was telling Jim yesterday about his dad and mother spent quite a lot of time just probably during the war
Yeah.
in Detroit. And during that time that they were in Detroit, both of them working, the wife, his mother, Muriel, worked for Price Waterhouse, and I don't know who else, but she worked, Price Waterhouse is one of the big 8 accounting firms back in those days, and she worked there, and your dad worked at, I'm not sure what, one of the factories down there.
Well, yeah. What did you, the L.A. Young Spring and Wire Company.
Is that right? Well, anyway, they worked down there during the war, and during that time, Nancy and Jim and Gary, I can't remember when each of you were born. They were born about a year and something apart, if I
Yeah.
remember. But
Well-
they all lived with us wherever we lived.
Yeah.
And yes,
Now,
Jim.
Mom brings up that point to me occasionally when I tell her,
Yeah, I know.
about how rough things are.
Yeah.
She's, no, we all,
You
she
know-
says, we all used to sleep in the same bed, you know?
Got that right. Got that right. Yeah, that's right.
Down the below. and
Well,
down
I
the-
know, I've told probably Scotty and Sharon a time or two about having to walk to school in Caro in the
Yeah.
wintertime when there wasn't, the drifts that went over M81 going into town hadn't even had a track going through them yet, you know, nobody'd been to town yet, but the school was open. The school was open when we got there, walked into town.
Yeah.
I know, the kids nowadays don't wanna hear that kind of foolishness.
Yeah, we walked uphill both ways.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, you did walk uphill.
Yeah.
That's right. That is correct.
Jim,
Yeah.
Now,
Hey,
who has
Jim.
another question?
Jim,
Jim.
There's a lady there.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Somebody had another question. Who was that? Okay, Jackson, you had a question. Didn't you have a question?
I have many, but.
Don't know which one to
Don't
ask
feel bad.
first.
We may not know the answer, but we'll work on it. We've got a
I'm
question.
not a doctor, but I'll take a look.
Oh, said like a true auto salesman. Who has a question?
I have a comment.
You have a comment, okay?
He went driving around and took pictures, which you'll have to see on his phone, of where they went to school. Is it a 1-room or 2-room schoolhouse?
That was 2
It
then.
was a 2-room schoolhouse at the
With a
time.
basement.
One teacher, 2-room schoolhouse.
And it's up on what road?
Well, it's right in.
Cameron Road and,
Where
Pictures of it.
M81 and.
Cameron Road.
Cameron Road.
Yeah. But we have some
Yeah,
good
subsequently,
pictures of
they've added on to it, but we had Evelyn, I had, all the time I was there, Evelyn Lassiter was the
Yeah.
teacher. And we had, and I ran into one of the guys that went to George School, you know, where George School's up east ways.
Yep.
And there was a guy who married, he was class of 47, year before me, but he married a girl from the class of 49, so he came to the gathering the other night, our class of 48 gathering, 49 gathering. And the guy named Lee Tomlinson, and I can remember he and his cousin, Bob Tomlinson, played for this baseball team for the George School.
Mm.
And we had, I don't remember the only cast of characters I remember was, I think I played third base and I was probably in fourth grade or something, a little kid. And our pitcher was Stella Dwyer, who was a lady, a woman, female type person. She may have been in the 7th or 8th grade, I don't know, but we were not a great team, and I'm trying to remember that I think we got beat about 42-0 or 42-2 or something. It was a pretty lopsided contest. Other questions? What do you want to know
Yeah,
about?
you know, the people at Caswell's and so forth. the
Caswell's,
area
yeah, I know.
They lived they had the option of either going to George School or Darby School.
Was that right?
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know that
I
until.
wouldn't have known that either.
Yeah, so that's probably why Tomlinson went to George School, because his younger sister
Well, I'm trying to
went to
remember
Darby
that
School.
I'm trying to remember that well, Patterson's Corners up there. I'm trying to think, there was a little market. I'm trying to think his
Yeah,
parents had a little market.
it used to
there.
be Lucky's Corner, something.
Well, I'm trying to think that his parents had some kind of a little market there back then.
Yeah,
I don't know
there's
that-
one right on the corner of,
Yeah, yeah, we turned around there yesterday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you guys went to a 2-room schoolhouse until what grade would you?
Eight. And this was the Darby School, and if you get on the Caro school system website, and there's a list on there, if you get in the right spot, of all of the similar schools like that around the county. And they're big on townships up here. And I don't know that the schools had anything to do necessarily with townships, but there were probably 25, I guess, of those little schools like the Darby School around Tuscola County. And of course, the county seat was Caro, and that was just one of them.
I've seen buses that say such and such consolidated school district, and
Yes.
I assume there must have been a time in the 50s or 60s when all those little schools got mashed together.
Yep, yep.
That's true.
Yep,
Well,
it was
we-
part of
we-
a political conspiracy that was being
Well,
formulated.
you know, I'm looking at the product of 2-room schools, and a lot cheaper, I'm sure, than the schools of today. And you seem to know how to function, and
Count.
speak, and count.
Count.
So evidently, you don't need to have pools and.
Well, I have to give Evelyn Hallassiter credit. I've talked to some people that didn't like her much, but she was kind of a disciplinarian.
Yeah.
Not horribly so, but
I
enough to
was-
get by.
I was rather afraid of her myself.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I remember one
I
time
think
she little Downey Romaine, he had a piece of cotton in his ear. It was on a winter day, and I was just feeling around with that cotton in his ear there, and she come with a ruler and just whacked the living hell out of my hand. Yeah.
That sounds like a friend of mine who came from up in New York State. And he went to, I think in his early grades, he went to a Catholic school.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the nuns had some of those little,
Yeah, foot rulers, yeah.
little devices that they whacked their hands with.
Mhm.
He said they were not too thrilled with that,
Yeah.
not too thrilled at all.
Wonder if that still goes down, huh?
I don't know.
No.
We have a Catholic school. They're not too far from us. I've never heard of people talking about that.
No. I
That
think so.
discipline anymore. Other questions, comments? Anybody here been in the military?
Briefly.
Oh, you've been in the military?
Mm.
Have you? I knew you were.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
How did you do it briefly?
Well, I was in the reserve program. I had some active duty, but it was limited compared to regular Army or whatever. So that's why I say briefly, because
Where did you go through basic training somewhere?
yeah, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Leonard Wood. Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri.
Then then off to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland.
Maryland. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a friend, a guy that was in our military association, past president of it, as a matter of fact, he's working, I think at that same, he's working in a testing facility up there now, working on the next iteration of the Humvee, or the next military vehicle.
Oh, yeah?
They've already developed it, but they're now testing, going through a lot of stuff now. I forgot what they call it, but where the Humvee cost, I don't know, $70,000-$80,000 for a piece, this sucker's
Yeah.
gonna cost $300,000 a piece. I mean, that's in a production line going type of thing, but they got everything but the kitchen sink on them, and they're geared more for, preventing problems with IEDs.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Explosive devices and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, you enjoyed your stint in the Army?
No.
Go to VA a lot?
Pardon?
You go to VA, Veterans Administration?
No.
You suffer from Veterans Administration?
No, I don't think I had enough active duty time. I missed it by a few
There ain't-
days, yeah, so
I don't know, I've never been to the VA itself. I went to our county back, a few years back, just as a curiosity to see if I could qualify for anything, or what I had to do to sign up.
what the parameters
And I
were,
told the
yeah.
guy what I was doing and where I was and all that sort of thing. He kinda shook his head and he handed me a piece of paper that had a bunch of stuff on it.
Well, hell,
It
you
had to
should
do
have
with-
qualified for everything.
I had to do with, I don't know, had to do with income and a bunch of stuff like
Oh,
that.
okay, yeah.
And so, as I went out the door, I tore it in half and threw it in the garbage can.
Mm.
So I've never been to, I've been to VA a lot of times to take people there, but I've never been to VA.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad never was in the military,
No,
was he?
no, he was, that was the reason, too skinny or something,
Too skinny.
yeah, he wasn't,
I never heard of that being a reason.
yeah, it was in his case, I guess. They were more particular about that. And your great-grandfather, see, he was turned down for the Civil War because of a bum finger.
Is that right?
Yeah, old Dr. John Tyler Joslin. Yeah, he
Bad
was
finger.
turned down because of a bum finger,
I'll be darned.
yeah. So
I
I guess
didn't
their
know
standards were higher back
I
then.
didn't know we had anybody in that war, but that's interesting.
Well, he
I
didn't-
mean,
he-
even close to it.
Oh, yeah, he, I guess, tried for it, but they turned him down, so.
Is that right? My dad, his dad's brother, at, I forgot what age he was, probably 18 or 19. Well, it was in, what, he said 1917? When the war
yeah,
started.
probably, you mean, in
Yeah,
the Marine
yeah,
Corps.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He went in the Marine Corps, and I think he was stationed at Langley a lot of the time. He went through
I
boot
think he
camp or
was
whatever it
at
is.
Quantico.
Quantico, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Quantico, yeah.
Mhm.
But I think he spent a lot of his time back, even now to some degree, but way back, you can go back to the Revolution, you can go back to Jefferson's time, President Jefferson. You remember, you've heard of the Barbary Pirates? You've heard of the Barbary
Yeah,
Pirates?
West Coast, yeah.
Okay, well, their Barbary Pirates were people, they were Muslims who were occupying the countries along the north shore of Africa, North Africa, right on the Mediterranean. And what they were doing, they were, as ships came in, regardless of where the ships were from, they were going out with pirate ships and capturing those trading ships and holding the people on there for ransom and holding the ships for ransom. And they'd go to the country, whether it's the US or France or Spain or wherever, and they'd collect, big buckets of gold to get their ship or their people back. And so it got to the point where it was just ridiculous. And our President Jefferson said, we need to stop this foolishness.
Yeah.
So he talked the Congress or whoever into spending a bunch of money to put up, a whole bunch of ships, like a half a dozen real fighting ships. And they put these ships together, and they had the sailor people on there to run the masts and whatever. And then they put a bunch of Marines on there, like a couple of dozen Marines on every ship. And they were the guys that were gonna fight off anybody that tried to board them. And so anyway, that's where, if you listen to the Marine hymn, you hear the
Halls of
Halls of Tripoli,
Montezuma.
Yep.
something about Tripoli in there.
Mhm.
Tripoli is
Yep.
one of the countries.
Shores of Tripoli,
Shores of
yep.
Tripoli. Well, that's where the Marine Corps first started. Was
There
during
was
that
some
period
kind of
time.
like a commission or some kind of a right. Derek, do you know about it? It was some kind of a law where they give a commission or they give some money to them if they.
Oh, you mean privateers?
Oh.
Yeah, there was something passed.
Yeah, mercenaries.
If you-
what are those called? Something papers. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Writs of something or other, but.
Our government was granting that to someone?
Yeah, if you could go off and defeat these,
Well, that could have been.
terrorists.
No,
Yeah.
that's different, Dad. That was used by like the colonial powers to like raid other colonial powers, like the gold shipping back from the New World. You're thinking
Anyway,
of privateers.
what I was leading up to was that my father spent a lot of his time while he was in the Marine Corps, but I think he was only in for 18 months before the war stopped. But during that period of time, a lot of his time was spent aboard ship on the Atlantic as one of those Marines that was stationed on every one of the Navy ships. There was just always a contingent of Marines on them to protect them in whatever degree they needed protection. But when we cleaned out, Anita and I cleaned out our house out there on Romaine Road, there was a box in there with my dad's old Marine uniform. He had a full-blown colored red striped pants and the whole 9 yards. Beautiful. I mean, the moths had just wiped it out totally. So we had to trash it, but.
It was hanging upstairs in the house,
Is that right?
for a number of years, yeah.
Anyway, did you have a question?
Well, one thing that stands out about our ancestry, your parents, is the double cousin idea. You know, 2 boys met 2 girls.
Yes.
You know anything about who met who first? How that happened?
The 2 girls, my dad and uncle both, I guess, were working in Detroit.
Yeah.
They're both working in Detroit in
yeah.
the, whatever it was, back in the, I forgot what year they got married, back in the early 20s or something, or late 20s.
No, your folks got married in 29.
29, that's what it was, yeah. Anyway, the girl, the Colliers, Will Collier and Blanche, and their girls and boys spent some time in Detroit area, didn't they? Back in that same time frame.
And our mothers were dance instructors at the.
That's right. What's the name of the place?
Well, it was in the Alhambra Theater, but it probably had a different building name, I don't know.
There's a place in New York City that.
Well, it was right on Woodward Avenue at the foot of Edison Street.
Is that right?
Well, I don't know if that mean anything or not. A lot of rich people lived down that street, that in Boston. And,
What he's
but
talking
anyway,
about-
that's how they met.
His mother and my mother, he said, were dancing, so they had these kind of like clubs.
Yeah.
And guys would come in and pay a certain amount of money, and I forgot what, I don't remember, that make a difference how much money it was, but they'd buy tickets for dancing. Just buy tickets for dance, and I don't know how they decided who was gonna dance with who, but that's what, they were in there doing that. Apparently got paid a little bit for doing it, I don't know, but apparently, I'm not sure who met who first. I'm guessing that my mother met my dad first. And then my dad introduced my mother to Hubert, and then ultimately they got his mother involved in it, and I suspect that's how it came about, but I'm just sort of guessing at a lot of that.
Yeah, they took the plunge 2 years later.
2 years later?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they were married the same day Dick was born.
Was that right?
Yep.
How about that?
Yep. Same town.
Same town. Jimmy's gone, he's out there. He was in the Air Force for some period of time. Jimmy, LaValle. And my brother, John, spent 3 years in the military. I think he just spent 3 years.
Yeah.
Uncle Harry didn't catch him, but anyway, John was in he was in the Nike missile. He was out in Sausalito, California, is a little community just north of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco.
In the Fresno area there.
And just to the west of that a little bit, you go up toward the ocean, and up on that bank, if you will, overlooking the Pacific and where the channel comes into under the bridge, they had this Nike missile silos up there. And we went out there, John Harbell, Uncle John Harbell took us out there once, and the Nike missile silos where they had the missiles is now covered. They got big metal plates covering the whole thing. You just walk over the top of them. But back when he was there, and I don't know how many of them they had, but they had these missiles out there that were ready to go out and blow up any ships that happened to come in and look bad for the people up there. So he spent most of his time out
Watching
there.
radar.
Watching radar, yeah, probably. And also, he spent a lot of time with Uncle John and Jean and their kids. Of course, their kids were small at that time, but he spent a lot of time with them.
Cause he moved there and they were already there.
Yeah, it was, of course, he didn't have a car back then, but I don't know how he.
Yeah, he did have a
John-
student
Well,
back there.
he didn't last, yeah, right. 'Cause
Yeah.
He stopped once on he and, one of those Jimmy Castle.
Okay,
One
okay.
of the Castle kids. Stopped to visit, spent the night with us in Bowling Green when I was going to
Okay,
school.
okay. Mhm.
And they left and he was gonna drop this Caswell kid off at some military base on the way out to California.
Yeah, probably Fort Sill.
Could be.
Yeah.
Anyway, John left his wallet either in or on a little dresser that was in the bedroom where he stayed with us.
Mhm.
And he had to borrow money from whoever the guy was. He was taken out there to get the rest of the way back, and we mailed it.
Oh, I
his
didn't
stuff
know
when he
that.
left there. But Anyway, and Brother Dick was like me. He went in the army probably in the latter part of '48, I guess.
Well,
Probably somewhere.
yeah, it
in
was October 17th.
there. Okay, that's about as precise as you can get.
Yeah, a week after Grandpa
That's
died.
That's okay, that's good. I went in June of '48, and he went in 6 months later or something like that, a few months later.
Yeah, just a few months, yeah.
But anyway, I forgot where he went through, well, hell, he went through basic in western Kentucky. And he went under, there was a soon activated section of 101st Airborne Division. He wore a 101st Airborne Division patch going through basic, but it didn't have the airborne on it.
I see.
They usually have a tab on the top that says airborne, but his didn't have that on it. And somewhere Dad had, in Melvin's, have you seen a little picture frame like that with your dad's 101st Airborne patch on it?
Yeah.
You see that? Okay, you know about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, he was in, he went through basic there, and then they sent him to Yokohama, or Tokyo, Yokohama, and he spent, until the Korean War started, he was in the MPs, the 519th MP Battalion. And when the Korean War started, the 519th, like everything in the Far East, got shipped to Korea like almost immediately. Sasebo, the base there at Sasebo, was loaded down with ships, loading up going to Korea. And Dick was one of them, and he was there when I got there. And our unit, our 187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team, was air-landed at Kimpo Air Base first part of September of 1950. The war started latter part of June of 50.
Yeah.
And when we landed there, the Marines had just come in. You know, the big line had been pushed all the way south by the North Koreans, almost down to Busan perimeter. And MacArthur or some of his dudes had a bright idea about landing this bunch of people up north here at Incheon to cut these guys off, to chop them, give them another front. And as soon as the Marines landed there, we were air landed in Kimpo Air Base. And the Marines then went on into Seoul, and a couple of our battalions went up the Kimpo Peninsula, which was still loaded with North Koreans. Well, not loaded, they had a bunch of North Koreans. The Marines had just bypassed, they just left them up there. And our guys were tasked with the problem of getting up there and wiping them out, which they did. And then on October the 20th, we hit September, October the 20th, they brought in about, I don't know, all the aircraft, transport aircraft they could find in the Far East Theater, flew them into Kimpo. And on October the 20th, we loaded, there was about 3,300 of us that loaded in those mostly C-119s and C-46s, few C-47s. Shoot it up and loaded in those planes, and they flew out over the Yellow Sea and up 100 and something miles and dropped us 40 miles north of Pyongyang, the then capital of North Korea.
Wow.
Current North Korean capital.
North of there.
Yeah. And the line was, I don't know, it was up somewhere down south of Pyongyang, 50, 60 miles. And it took a tank column, I think there was a brick tank column that got to us in about a day and a half, 2 days, something like that. But anyway, I was talking about Dick's, Dick, his 519th was, they moved around a lot, and I'm not sure, but when I was in, where was it? when we were in Pyongyang, after we pulled back into Pyongyang, after our jump, and we had another bunch of people that went north, and the 1st Marine Division, I know, was one of them that went up all the way to the Yalu River and the Joslin Reservoir, which is it's a big long lake that's made by the damming up of the Yalu River. Looks just like Kentucky Lake in Tennessee, except
Yeah.
That border with China?
Old Hickory
border
Lake.
with North Korea and China.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I don't like to get political, but I got a book that I read just a few years back that talks about the Korean War. This guy did a really top-notch service of researching it, getting information, facts. And one of the things was that a bunch of dummies in the Daiichi building in Tokyo was where MacArthur's headquarters was. And MacArthur, of course, he thought he was right at the right hand of God, you know, nobody could touch him. And he had all kinds of multiple star generals that were working for him and sorting things out and feeding him information. And there was a lot of intelligence coming from people over on the Yalu River, up in the north part, coming into Daiichi through channels, I'm sure, Kor and so forth, Korea, but coming into these generals and colonels, and they knew that MacArthur didn't want to hear about that, because MacArthur had already told Truman, no, the Chinese will never come into the war, never come into the war, no problem. And they knew that was his philosophy, and when intel came in, that they got 20 Chinese divisions over here mounted on the far side of the Yalu, they wouldn't tell them, they didn't tell them. So as a consequence, when those people did come across the river, we were not anywhere near ready for them. And then we lost, I'm sure we lost a bunch of people because of that. That's, I mean, that's my philosophy of it. May or may not be wrong, but I think I'm probably right. Anyway, talking about Dick, his 519th MPs were moving around. They were just a battalion-sized outfit. And a lot of what they did was support. They had a lot of roads over there in Korea that they wanted to keep pristine, if you will. They didn't want any enemy messing with them, so they had these MPs scattered around in different places to make sure that the roads were kept open. And one of the things that Dick did, I know quite a bit of, they always had a lot of contraband that, you know, the GIs would sell, or people would steal it and take it to town and sell it or whatever. So in every major town, they usually had, if you knew what, they had a lot of things like army, probably not too many rifles and military weapons and stuff, although some, but a lot of other things that were military. And what they do is they'd send these MPs out and go back down through all the streets and the shops, and anything that looked like it was a U.S. GI issued item, they just take it. They just, Koreans wouldn't argue with them because they shoot them probably or give them a bad time. But anyway, they knew that it was stolen and it was belonged to the U.S. So they take it, and they get truckloads of those things. I know that Dick, a couple times I've met with him, and I'm trying to think. We were at Suwon, one side down south of Seoul, once up in Pyongyang. We were in Pyongyang up in North Korea. He was there once, and I out on the river there in Pyongyang. Our engineers had set up showers. They take two of those big squad tents and put them together. Had showers on one side and a dressing room type of thing on the other, where you got out of your clothes and hung up your whatever. And I hung up my clothes and had a shoulder holster with a 45 in it hanging up there. And when I came back, got toweled off and all that, and started getting my clothes, I had a leather shoulder holster that I bought, Korean one, and it was hanging there, but the 45 was gone. And that was a major panic.
Yeah.
But anyway, shortly thereafter, Dick came, and we got together, and we just talked for a while. And I told him of my problem, and he didn't seem to get too excited about it. But anyway, a couple, 3 or 4 days, just sometime pretty quickly thereafter, we got together again, and at that time, we were in our regiment. I'm not sure where all the line companies were, but our headquarters was in an old university building, and we had bunks set up and so forth. And he came in, and we greeted each other, and he reached in his pocket and threw out a nice new 45 on the bed. And he said, "Will this replace the one that you lost?" I I said, yes, it sure will, and I said, I don't really wanna know where that came from, so I suspected it was one of those that they had policed up from elsewhere. But anyway, we did get together several times, and it was good to see him, and he was, you know, I think he was a little on the wild side when he was a youngster like that. He talked about we talked about M1s one day. M1 is one of the main weapons, rifle weapons that we had back in that day. And he talked about taking them out. They had a bridge over a river they were guarding to make sure nobody took over the bridge. And he said they took one of those things out and they had a pretty bandoliers of ammunition, and they just put them on semi-automatic and just go bam, 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 just as many of them as they could, and just as fast as they could load in. They come in clips of 8 or 10 or a dozen or something. Anyway, a lot of dumb things like that he did. Not that dumb, they were kid things. Kids did it.
They were pretty young. He was probably young.
19, 18, whatever it was. But anyway, he came back to the States and got out pretty quick after he got back, I think. And our group, I was first sent, Dick Gage was one of my high school guys, and I enlisted for the 82nd Airborne Division down at Fort Bragg. Because we had a friend by the name of Elmer Bragg who was a member of the 82nd Airborne Division at that time. And so we go through Knox, and then when we get out of Knox, our orders are not the 82nd, but the 11th Airborne in Japan. So we get shipped over to Japan, and when we got there, we found out we were assigned to the 187th Glider Infantry Regiment up on Hokkaido, the northern island, which is where we went initially. And he went to one company and I went to another. And then after 3 weeks, they loaded us up and sent us back. And Hokkaido, back in those days, you had to take a ferry across from the Honshu, the little island, to the northern island. And so we went back down the trains and all that sort of ferry down to a place called Yamato down near Sendai, and went through several weeks, 6 weeks of airborne school, parachute training school. And back up to Hokkaido, and then probably less than 6 months later, 4 or 5 months later, spring of '49, the whole division, all up and down Japan, came back to reopen then Camp Campbell, Kentucky. And after we all went on leave, and we came back from leave, and 3 weeks later, I met her in her front yard. Some of the rest of that is history. But going back to Korea, we in March, after I'd been back, this was in 1949, we came back, and in August of 50, they put together this regimental combat team, 187th Regimental Combat Team, which is our Rakasans. Rakasans in Japanese means falling down umbrella, because they don't have a word for parachute. And we always had to make, every 3 months, we made pay jumps, they call them. In order to stay on jump status, which is an extra $50 a month, you had to make a training jump, pay jump. And the Japanese, Rakasan! So anyway, picked up Rakasan. And if you go to Fort Campbell, in the 187th area, you'll see one of these tories in front of each of the major battalions down there, only they're 15 feet tall and 5-6 feet wide and all painted red. And they're all Rakasans. And, anyway, back to 187th Regimental Combat Team in 1950, August, got on transport trains and went to San Francisco area, got on troop ships, went to Japan, and motored over to Ashia Air Force Base, which is on the northern part of the southern island. And we spent the night maybe 2 nights, on a beach there. Back then we had these little simple light sleeping bags made out of a kind of an army blanket type of thing, only they're a sleeping bag. And that's all we had at that time. We didn't have winter equipment. But anyway, sleeping out on the beach was, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and I hear these clack, 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 clack. And goddamn, I had a flashlight. I shined this sucker out, and here's some kind of a crab that's standing up about that tall. He got these legs out there, and he's going down the beach. These feet are all clacking together. Clack, 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 clack. It sounds like a bucket of bowls rattling down the beach. And I woke up again and I felt something kind of tickling me on the leg, and it jumped off on the sleeping bag, and I got my flashlight out again, and it was one of those 1,000-legged things with about 1,000 legs, and about that long and about as big as your thumb, just kind of easing along.
A millipede.
Yeah.
More fun, more fun. Anyway, we were air landed, went from a Shia Air Force Base in Japan in C-119s, which is it's a twin-tailed aircraft that'll hold probably 40, 50 troops. Well, the one that we went over on, there was probably about 20 troops and all their equipment. We had a 3/4 ton truck, 3/4 ton vehicle, which you know what 3/4 is, and then we had a ton trailer and a PE-75 generator in that trailer. And the battery, the whole floor of the plane, I think, was covered with boxes of batteries of one type or another. Anyway, we took off from a Shia Air Force Base. It goes right out over the ocean, right out over the China Sea, headed toward Korea. And probably the 2 days before that, a C-54 with a bunch of nurses in it didn't make it all the way off, and they cracked up right in the ocean, right off there. And they had a bunch of, looked like PT boats and other boats out there doing salvage work as we took off over the top. But anyway, air landed at Kimpo Air Base, which was Kimpo International, when we flew in there back in the late 90s, vacation over there. And that's where we stayed until we got sent up and dropped over north of Pyongyang. And during that winter, the Chinese communists came in like late November of 1950, and pushed everything all the way back. And when we left Pyongyang, the North Korean capital, you could hear artillery fire, mortar fire up north someplace where they had already entered and come down, quite a ways, several, 100 miles, maybe 75 miles from when they came across the border. But anyway, we went on south and way on south. Seoul got captured again by the North Koreans and the communists. And in March the 23rd of '51, we went down at Daegu, which is just north of Busan, down on the southeast corner of it. At Daegu, they again brought in all these aircraft and loaded us in it and took us up and dropped us about 60 miles north of Seoul, which was then occupied by the Chinese and the North Koreans. And so we got our, as they say, the old airborne guys talk about these mustard stains that you get on your jump wings and stars. Each combat jump you get a star, and you're able to wear a star on your jump wings. So they talk about those as mustard stains. But anyway, we got our second mustard stain on it. And then, I don't know, I think it was out of Daegu, I got to do an R&R for a week in Yokohama. And we came back to the States. I came back in September of '51. And she was still there, still single. She was still single. And one of the things I found a while before I found them all, she told me about some of them, but I think it was when her mother died, we found like a shoebox or cigar box or something with a bunch of these little mementos in it. Was like Tex Benekes, or like dance card type things, where you go to a dance and they got a dance card or something. Anyway, in there the references to Tex Beneke and Benny Goodman and a bunch of these big orchestras that had been at Fort Campbell to entertain the troops down there. She'd been to a lot of them. She had some friends that were
Lady friends.
Yeah, no, they were guy friends. I knew most of them. They were. But anyway, she
Yeah, I went to high school with.
No, it was fun to needle her a little bit about that. But I guess one of the points is that she was still living a little bit during the time when she should have been living a little bit. And then it took her, a little bit of time, a couple months after that to catch me. Something like that. Anyway, so much for my military. I got out after we got back 6 months later, and after I enlisted for 3 years, Uncle Harry Truman gave us another year when the Korean War started. Then they let us out a couple of months early. It was very nice of him.
Yeah.
Harry was top notch.
exceedingly generous.
You know, the wonderful thing about Harry Truman, he was probably the last president that when he got out of office, left Washington, he got in his own sedan
Yeah.
automobile, and he and, what was his name, Mamie? Bess Truman, yeah, okay.
Mhm.
They got in their car and they drove back to wherever he was from out there.
Independence,
Missouri,
Yeah.
yeah. And he paid all his own bills.
Yeah.
He didn't even, I don't know, they had a pension, I guess they had a pension. He didn't apply for a pension until somebody from Congress sort of forced it on him, and they got him, I don't know, a few $1,000s a month or something like that. Top-notch guy. What do you wanna know, Rick? Anything you wanna know about Joslin's?
So you're saying most Joslins are mostly from Great Britain area?
Yes, I think so.
Jocelyn boys, yeah.
I think going back to the DNA,
The Colliers too, or?
Colliers, I think so. I think they were, actually, Margaret could tell us more precisely about specifics, but I sense that the Colliers were from England also. I don't know that, but I sort of guess that they are.
Yeah.
DNA, well, I don't know, the DNA for Joslin's, when you get this DNA, they give you information that's semi-specific, but then they kind of qualify it and say, well, we're not quite sure about all of that. It could be this, and they give you some other alternative thoughts. And they, like, in the Joslins, they show the maps. We got some maps that go along with these little things they give you. And it shows kind of routes where a lot of them have moved. And most of the arrows show you moving from, say, Great Britain to the United States, with a few little bitty ones moving someplace else. But most of them are coming to the northeast United States, up in the upper east coast, Massachusetts and that area up there. And then they show a lot of movement south and west, like down into New York State and out into Ohio and Indiana and in the Great Lakes area. And then the movement stops. There's nothing going west. You don't see anything going past Lake Michigan or Chicago. It all sort of slows down and very few going south too. I don't remember much going south. But there's little pockets of Joslins around the world, as I mentioned. Most of them are in the United States, and there's one country's got quite a few, fairly decent number of them is India. But of course, India's got a couple of millions of people over there. Jimmy, you had a question or a comment?
Somebody like to say hi.
Oh my God, there's little cousin Nancy. Cousin Nancy, how you doing? How you doing?
Well, I'm doing.
You're doing.
Yeah.
I'm not, somebody asked me to ask you if you had a boyfriend yet, and I told them I didn't think so, but. Ha! What's that? Ha! Huh? Does that mean you got one or you haven't got one? No.
Hey,
Huh?
I've had all of that I want.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the girls will love to hear that. Well, so you behaving yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're still driving down to the local market, aren't you?
Pardon?
You're driving to the local market.
I haven't been over there in over a week.
Well, you got to drive. You still got that Toyota? You still got the Toyota?
Yeah.
Well, you got to drive it. You got to drive it every now and then.
I know that. I get up to the mailbox.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
I don't like getting out in the heat.
Well, but it's dry heat. Remember that.
Yeah, but it's 100 degrees. And
Yeah, I know.
It's hot.
Yeah, I know. They tell us Easterners that it's not too
Dry.
hot. It's just dry heat. You should be able to take it. Heat is heat, any way you slice it.
Who's in the blue shirt?
Say it again.
Who's in the blue shirt?
Johnny.
Who's in the blue shirt?
Oh,
That's
that-
the blue shirt
Rick.
right back here. That's
Yeah.
Dick's
Who's that?
Rick. Dick's oldest, Rick.
Oh,
Remember-
really?
Yeah, really, yeah.
Got there.
Who? Say again.
That Rick in that blue shirt?
Yeah, that's Rick.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. And you, right behind him, you see the little guy back there is Jason. That's his son.
And he's bigger
Oh
than
my
Rick.
God.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't you feel bad at 125 pounds?
Yeah.
Huh? I'm just guessing. You're little person now.
Did Paul get there? Did Melvin get there?
Yeah.
Melvin and Paul are here. They happen to be out of the room right now,
Oh.
but they're here.
Yeah, well.
Joyce is here.
Yeah, I talked to her.
Did you? Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Your little cousin Jim, your brother Jim's here too.
Yeah, where is he?
He's right here, right there.
Oh, hi,
Yeah,
Jim.
I was right here.
Right here. Laureen's over across the way.
Indubitably.
Yeah, I guess so. Anita and Scott. Yeah, we're doing good. We're about to phase out here. I'm about to run out of steam. I can't talk anymore.
Yeah, I know. I heard you telling your war stories.
Oh, did you?
I didn't hear what you were saying, but I could tell it was your voice.
You didn't believe any of them either, did you?
No. About like fish stories.
Fish stories. Aha! Now I got you. Now I got you.
That's Rick.
Anyway, you know Johnny? Can you see?
Did Gary, who's that?
Gary,
Johnny.
that's brother John's Johnny.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Johnny, how are you?
I'm doing well. I got a little skinnier since you saw me
Remember
last.
your graduation.
Graduation. You remember your graduation?
Oh.
You're doing better than he is. He can't remember it. Here's his son Derek and daughter Ariel. Can you see him?
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Muriel.
Ariel, not Muriel. That's close.
Oh, did Gary
Anyway,
get there?
who's that?
Gary.
Gary.
Gary did not make it. He was supposed to come, and I suspect his memory got bad. I don't know, but
Oh.
he told us he was coming, but he didn't make it.
Oh, who is that right there?
That's Rose. That's Johnny's Rose.
Hi.
Okay, who was right next door?
That's daughter Sharon.
Hey, Mom, take your thumb off the camera.
Your what?
Take your thumb off the camera.
There you go.
There you go. Okay. You know who that is?
Yeah.
Hi.
You know they're moving, don't you? Or did you?
She did.
Yeah, you know. Okay. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna give you back to Jimmy. You have a fun time and we're missing you here. Next time you have a gathering, you need to come. Get Janine and come on east. Here's Jimmy back. Nice talking to you, Nancy.
Nice talking to you, Bob.
Thank you.
Toodaloo.
Everybody's waves.
Looks more like, ooh,
Uncle, your dad.
oh,
Uncle.
that's good. That's good. That's good.
Bob, Uncle Bob,
Yes.
he's talking to you.
Hi there, Paul.
Yeah.
What can we do for you?
Hi, Bob.
Hi there, bud. Nice to see you. Glad you came in. Glad
Mom
you
wants
came
to
in.
see Paul.
Yes, here,
Paul.
bye. Bye, guys.
Look, this is Nancy. Do you remember Nancy?
Oh,
There's
yeah,
Paul,
yeah,
yeah.
it's your game.
Yeah, she's out. I'll give him a hug for you. There you go. We got him hugged.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye, Paul.
Nice to see you, Paul.
Bye.
Take care.
See Paul.
Are you going?
Yeah, I'm gonna go home. Bye,
Uncle.
Hey, you got your thumb over something, Mom.
Hey, Mel, you leaving?
The camera.
You leaving? Okay.
I guess.
Oh.
All set. Hey, my battery's about to die, so we'll talk to you a little later.
While you're signing off back there, may I have your attention again, please? I think Norman's getting ready to bail out, so I want to chat for just a minute about, on the last item on your agenda in there, for those of you who want to look at it, it talks about suggestions for next year's gathering and succession planning. The succession planning, who might take on the task of organizing and executing this Joslin family reunion for the next year, as this is my final reunion in that capacity. So,
So you're handing in your resignation.
let's go to the next page. And we can discuss it now, or we can just drop it and let something happen, or if somebody wants to volunteer, one person that would, I'm sure, support anything that wanted to be done would be cousin, Margaret, who's ill right now. She's been a stalwart in keeping things moving. And the other thing, she's got about a whole pile of people that come and support this gathering, and we're missing them. Julie and her little girl,
Katie.
Bella.
Oh, Julie, your daughter?
Yeah. I think they're, trying to think, who talked, did you?
I talked to them.
Is Julie back in Texas? Is she in
Yeah,
Carolina?
they've gone back already.
Okay, but I
They're
think
probably gonna go back
she's
over
gonna
this year again.
come back to Margaret sometime soon.
Mhm.
And Billy, the son, and his 2 kids and his wife, who had planned to come too, sent me an email a couple days ago and said that they were not gonna be able to come because of their mother's condition, et cetera. And I'm sure, although I didn't hear anything from Katie and her daughter who were coming, I'm sure that's Margaret's illness is the reason they didn't come too. So anyway, Margaret gets squared away then. And the one good thing, we're working on Jackson's over here. See, if Jackson moves up to, he's got a place up on the thumb that I don't know what his status is with it, but what I understand, the potential is there of your moving up there. Is that safe to say?
We're there.
All right, say again?
We are there.
Oh, you're there, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
you were there, okay.
We planned.
Anyway, inasmuch as he is there, they have at least a couple of kids over in Carolina that might come to visit them and come to a Joslin reunion if it was in this area. Is that a safe bet?
That would be our hope.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I mean, it's something to think about.
Yeah, that's our.
I don't know
dream.
that you'd ever get that gal from San Francisco back here, but
That would be a dream.
stranger things have happened.
Oh, yes.
Stranger things have happened. They have a daughter that teaches Chinese at a private boys' school in San Francisco. Huh?
It's boys and girls, it's just. a
Boys and girls, okay.
Private
Private
school.
school.
Co-ed, okay.
But I can imagine somebody teaching Chinese, that's, wow. Anyway, do I have any comments relative to what we might do, I say we collectively, not me necessarily, although I have whatever I got in the computer file relative to people's names and addresses, and whatever I got is certainly available.
What's your main task? Is it organizing and getting people together and
Yeah.
following up? That's right.
And doing that booklet,
Yeah.
that's a lot of work.
Yeah. Jim, I'm not trying to forget Jim here. Jim's sort of the man on the ground, not sort of, he is the man on the ground here. He makes arrangements, has made the arrangements for all the gatherings that we've had.
Yeah, kind of
And
a
he's-
passive capacity, but, yeah.
Well, on your little, in the inside cover of your brochure there is the meeting notice, and I think we got Jim as a person to contact RSVP to.
Yeah, point man.
Point man, yeah.
Yeah.
Man on the ground. But anyway,
Next year it will be the 10th.
10th, okay,
Oh, wow.
yeah. Well, I think that's probably right, because we just had the 10th class of 48 thing that I had anything to do with, had involvement with. Anyway, any comments? Any volunteers? Any thoughts on when to do it and how to do it and who to do it? Mostly who?
Well, I make the motion, we let her ride and see what happens.
Let it ride and see what happens.
Yeah, the succession part of the,
Okay, well, that's
Ceremony
what
here.
we're talking about here is whether to pursue more discussion of Jocelyn's or whether we let them fade into the sunset for a while. Or
I
whether
don't
we.
think that'll happen, but,
And the other thing is that well, another thing is that although we've had it here, there's no rule that says you gotta have it in Caro, Michigan. You can just as easily have it someplace else, but, and you've gotta go where you're gonna get the most Joslins to attend.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing is getting attendance and people getting enthused about coming and participating and feeling comfortable and happy about what you see and what you get when you get there. And that you, when you go home, you don't grumble and grumble, oh, yeah, I wish I hadn't gone to that thing. But, you know, so we got to avoid that if we can, but anyway, any comments, or John, what do you think?
I'm gonna consider what you said, being involved in organizing it.
Okay,
I figured I'd be seeing you tomorrow and
yeah, okay,
talk a little bit.
okay,
I'll
that's
help
fine.
you, so I'll be used to, yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
Good.
Where's your daughter, Jimmy, Regina, is she goofing
Renee.
off someplace? I saw her a couple days ago, she waited on us at the Brentwood.
Yeah. Renee.
Renee, yeah,
Renee,
yeah,
yeah.
Renee.
Yeah, she's got she's attending a party for the boss man.
Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah, his daughter was getting married.
Yeah.
Beachy?
Yeah.
I gotta chew on him a little bit.
Mm.
Jim had everything all set up over at the Brentwood for,
And his daughter, they booked the place out for his daughter's wedding.
was that what it was?
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Oh,
Renee's
well.
waiting,
We got bumped.
part of the
then.
wait staff.
But we got bumped anyway, that was. And I was gonna get a hold of Beachy when I was over a couple days ago, and I never could find him, I don't know where he was,
Good thing you
but.
did.
Huh?
Good thing you did, since it was for his daughter's wedding.
Anyway, if it's the will of the group, we'll just let things slide unless somebody has, when I say slide, I'm talking, let some time elapse before somebody grabs the ball and goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear Johnny said that he would do something, and I said I'd help him?
He said he'd talk about it,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
He's gonna talk to me about it.
Yeah.
I'll give him all the sage advice I can give him. That's all I can offer. That and whatever I got in the computer, which is just information about people. But anyway, I'd like to see something happen. I'd like to believe that whatever effort I put into it,
Yeah.
and I could thank Sharon for all the effort she's put in.
Yeah.
She's got these flowers and so forth, and we couldn't
Beautiful.
possibly do it with the colors on our Joslin crest are white
Oh,
and
is that,
blue, blue and white.
And
So
gold.
we had some purple and gold ones left from our class of '48 thing. Nah, that ain't gonna work, they're the wrong color, so we gotta get some blue and white ones. But anyway, thank you for putting the flowers together, Sharon, I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you all for coming. Rick, it's delightful to see you and Jason come, just delightful to see you. And it's delightful
Absolutely.
to see Joyce,
Nice seeing you.
Joyce and her daughter
Nice to
come
be
to
seen.
us.
Yeah.
She's been through a difficult time, but she's in good shape now, I think. Paul, it's nice to see you again too. Just delighted to see you. And thank you for Melvin for looking after things, and if you can jar some of those sisters of yours loose, or sisters and other relatives, I'd like to have them back in the fold too. Yeah. With that, if there are no other comments for the betterment of the Joslins, we will be adjourned. Did you have-
Definitely check out. I guess I'm just kind of plugging my own work.
Okay.
But if you want to check out the the little family
What
tree.
specifically, you want them to look for the accuracy of this, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I could have gotten it wrong, and also just like if you want to see
All right, well,
yourself
okay.
in the tree, could be
Bob
kind of cool.
Jackson, what did
Is
you
that
wanna
something
say?
you could email out to people?
I could if I had everyone's email.
We do
although
have emails.
I would like to delegate that to Uncle Bob.
In the list, there's a list in there, there should be.
Oh boy, Dad, is there any way I can delegate this to you? I can send you the PDF. Can you send out the emails?
Okay.
Alright. I'll send you the PDF.
Thank you, James.